In my falcon form, I flapped my wings and soared onward and upward across the sky in order to reach my destination. Once I spotted with my falcon vision, I allowed gravity to take over as I dived into the destination like a meteorite would. Here in the ancient city of Edfu, my home, its citizens worship me so well that they knew that I am meant to become king. Some, including the matchmaker that my mother hired, wanted me to claim the throne and become king after I marry Hathor. By going through matchmaking problems, and it's horrifying to endure through the process. I'll tell you why in a few minutes. Most wanted me to avoid the matchmaker at all costs so I can maintain the title of Pharaoh in my own. But the thing is, I still have to marry in sequence to become the new king. Others wanted me to rule alone and not marry, which is my goal and the reason why I needed to achieve the goal in the first place that I had in mind ever since I was a kid. Become the king and not marry a goddess or any other mortal lady. Anyhow, Edfu is a peaceful destination, but busy and sometimes violent with incidents that are almost as destructive as a sandstorm. And that's not entirely the case at times, but still. Let me tell you some examples of violent plots. One example of such a conflict, like all situations, is that earlier this year, I learned that Anubis, now at the age of 17, was involved with stealing and giving the stolen items or food storages to the poor. And every time he steals something like that, he would end up getting chased by my mother's guards. However, he has found ways to avoid them, which I'm not surprised to see happening to him. To be honest, he told the truth, saying that he is just trying to help those in need, mainly those who don't have enough money for anything, specifically the poor or homeless. Since then, he continued doing the right thing, stealing and giving up the stolen items, such as food, to the poor. Another example of an incident that happened recently was 2 nights ago, when Anubis and I headed to the Pharaoh's palace to give a bracelet back to a princess whom Anubis kind of fell in love with. We completed the task, but we were surrounded by the guards of my uncle's kingdom, and Anubis was kidnapped. But it was fortunate that I escaped and explained to my mother what had happened to my cousin. The last and the final example, it didn't have me involved with the incident, but let me tell you. At the same night that I was telling my mother what happened to Anubis, 3 minutes later, around the same time, I was usually going to fall asleep, I spied on my mother's talking to Mot, the ancient Egyptian goddess of justice. Found out that Bastet was kidnapped by a band of thieves. We had no idea who was behind the kidnappings of 2 of my family members and allies. But we know that Set was involved with the kidnapping of Bastet. Okay. I apologize for the wrong subject that you were looking for. You probably get the idea of what it was like. It's barely chaotic, busy for the most of the time, but it is home. Anyways, moving forward. Noticing that Kanu, the ancient Egyptian ram-headed god who created a few humans with his potter's wheel and some clay, is walking across the busy merchant street. Recognizing that his eyes were completely shut, I immediately swooped up a little and flew down across the merchant homes, trying to save him. Refusing to land on the ground, I flapped my wings onward up into the air, avoiding some sort of chaotic destruction that involved a mortal man's arm broken somewhere between the elbow and the humerus, and a few others crashed themselves into the tangled chaos. I realized a few more mortals came to the rescue, trying to unweave the injured mortals out of there. I luckily found a place to land, witnessing what had happened. And in spite of my chance of rescuing Kanoom from a tragic crash such as this one, right now, it was already too late. Kanoom made it to the other side, and it was fortunate that he was unharmed. I was not pleased at all, but there was nothing I could do. Besides, well, why would he just do something stupid like that? He would get killed or wounded or worse. And that is not okay to walk across the street. But it seemed to me that he was probably testing out his luck or whatever. But then again, I was pleased that he was okay, and I made the right decision to let him avoid such a tragedy, or who knows what would have happened to him. I ignored what Kanoom had in mind, nor the accident that arose, swooping off my perched location and looking for another place to land by the circling around the sky a little. I scanned the area with my falcon vision, hopefully proving them that I am on time, and no, I have never been late before. Once I did so, I dived down and once again on top of a merchant's home, landing there before I transformed back into my godly self. You know, the head of a falcon and the body of a man. Self. You know that, right? Look, there he is, the god of sky, and kingship has arrived, a mortal kind gasped, pointing at me as I raced to the edge of the home. I quickly hopped off the roof, landing on the ground with my feet, and panted, "I'm here." Each mortal and deity just stared at me as I placed my hands on my hips, closing my eyes, smiling widely, and panting, ignoring them. Everyone had different expressions, I figured, especially some of my family members. Unfortunately, without reawakening my eyes, I noticed two Egyptian deities missing, besides my mother, who's at home right now. Anubis, my cousin, and Bastet, the ancient Egyptian cat-headed goddess of the home, who's a friend of mine. Thoth, who was in front of my view, just scowled at me before writing a few things in his scroll. And I could tell he's not impressed, but for what reason? Because I'm now in such a chaos with dark brown and creamish white falcon feathers in my hair, my garments, and my wrist and ankle cuffs. But none of my sandals, to be quite honest. Thoth had a long gray beak, white feathers, black kohl around his eyes, and a bluish headdress tight. He wore an ankh, with a string that went through the ankh's top part, around his neck as well, as not really covering his brown pigmented chest, with one blue large cuff on each arm, with one gold wrist cuff on each wrist. He was also clothed in a short yellow shindig that revealed the white in the center, with a golden belt that held only 4 colors to give a clear point of view. Like Mother, he was barefooted, and yes, he wore golden ankle cuffs upon his ankles. And when I reopened my eyes, my pride got the best of me. When I figured out that I was mistaken, and my hope of being on time was gone. And it seemed to me that my pride and arrogance had gotten the best of me, almost as always. I was late. Not to mention, it was the first time that I was late. But how? I ignored that question that I had in mind and just stared at Thoth with an awkward expression on my face. Trying to be serious, but detected nervousness on what he was about to say to me. "You're late for the first time in your life, Horus." Thoth crossed his arms, scroll in one hand, an Egyptian pen on the other. "Not only that, but you were just 10 minutes late." "What?" I sarcastically asked, removing my hands off my tips. The thought that I had net gem to complete my task for me, and I had other things to. I'm sorry, but that is unacceptable. No excuses. Now, let's get you clean for your coronation plus wedding. I groaned, rolling my eyes at him. Do I really have to? Well, you have to if you're willing to marry Hathor. Listen, I don't want to marry Hathor, but I'm willing to become the next pharaoh, so Khnum joined the conversation between Thoth and I. This is what your mother wants, yes, Horus? I hesitated when all mortals went back to the regular everyday thing. Yes, so? So you can't disappoint her now, can you? I sighed sadly. No, I can't, for I have made a promise that I won't let her down. Unless things go awry, shouted an ancient Egyptian goddess, Heket. The ancient Egyptian frog-headed goddess of healing and fertility, who is also known as the wife of Khnum. In some cases. I glared at the goddess, however, all she did was gleefully giggle. I'm just saying, Horus, Heket continued to giggle. Just saying. Fortunately, I ignored the frog goddess and focused on my conversation with Khnum. Like Heket said, I scoffed. But this time I will not let my mother down and not allow things to advance into chaos nor anything invalid. Good then, Khnum merrily affirmed. Now let's get started by having you clean and ready to go. Khnum led me inside the home so I can begin preparing for whatever lies ahead of me, where a 40-year-old maid, Jamila, who his mother's favorite maid in our honor, and my not so future wife, Hathor, was waiting for me to arrive, preparing the bath for me. Thoth, on the other hand, opened the curtain for most of us deities to enter, allowing me to enter first, then Khnum, thirdly Heket, and two other goddesses, and finally Thoth himself, letting go of the curtain as he entered the tavern, or whatever you might want to say. While the rest of the ancient Egyptian deities remained outside, probably guarding the entrance, talking to their allies, or waiting for me to complete what it is I'm about to carry off. Thoth, Khnum, the two goddesses, I'll tell you their names later. Heket and I marched into the room where my bath was anticipating for me. In the meantime, I halted myself as I watched Heket just kiss Khnum on the cheek and return to the entrance. And when Hathor completed her task of filling the bath with water and rich, soapy bubbles, she recognized me, but let me tell you that she's not expecting my falcon feathers to stick out everywhere, even in my hair.